Hey guys, this is Scott and Stephen James. This is Talking and we are talking Mötley Crüe tonight. We did last episode and we're going to do it again on this episode, specifically for a shout at the devil. And as you see right there behind us, it's Mötley Mayhem Unleashed.
Let's go.
Why not? Let's do it. Um, Stephen, this is episode 50, right?
Wow.
Right. I know we were thinking about doing like a big to do, but better just to do a show, right?
Yeah,
But as always, we appreciate you guys tuning in week
for
after
sure.
week. Um, I played around with different headphones, so I'm going to take this one out. um, and in that, just work through. I just lost my train of thought. How's that for 49 shows? We made it, then we just
Work
petered
through
out
with
on
the
this one.
sound.
Yeah, I know now it's weird. Here,
Yeah,
let me fix this again. Yeah,
we'll edit this.
I'm such a professional. Yeah,
Scott will edit this out,
yeah.
or keep it in. We'll be right back. We'll stay
We'll,
right
we'll, we'll keep it in. Yeah. So anyway, there.
here. Let's see.
Now you can see, like before, I had these big giant headphones, and now I'm just condensed down.
Yep.
Motley Crue shout at the devil. We thought, and especially, and it's been kind of cool, Stephen. Um, First off, thank you everyone who has tuned in to the show.
Uh-oh.
Um, it's over a year now. Are you moving on?
Yeah, I was like, what did
Yeah.
I do?
Um, it's been over a year now. This is the 50th
That's
episode,
crazy.
and again, I was listening to this record this morning to and from work. It's 35 minutes. It's 11 songs, so it kind of fits in perfectly. And I kind of forgot how good this was. And I know I said that last time about Too Fast for Love, but definitely Shout at the Devil. Like for me, the two top Motley records, so good, right? So good.
Especially the intro. It's just kind of like, wait, what's coming up here?
Yeah,
Like, so it's a total different. The first album was that, oh yeah, this is good stuff, and then when you first put this first track on, you're like, whoa, what's going on here?
yeah,
I loved it. It was the coolest thing ever.
yeah. I remember, I believe, I'll say that, right? Because haven't they said, and this is our how brains work episode, which if you're listening, you know they barely do. But like when it comes to memories, is it more you convince yourself you had a memory versus you actually remembered it? So
Right.
in this case, I've probably convinced myself that and I've said this before. So this was 83. I was 13, rode my black Schwinn Cruiser to Music Plus with my buddies, and we picked up the record, and it had the pentagram on it, and you open it up, and the folded open was just like, whoa!
Yeah.
I'm not showing this to my mom,
No.
and we kind of smuggled it into the room. Which as soon as you turn it on, and back then we had the big, you know, big giant speakers that were half our size, and it was the console set up with the tape deck and the mixer, the EQ, and the turntable. And yeah, what you're saying, Stephen, when it just starts that kind of just ominous sound to it, it was. I haven't said this word in a while. I don't think I've said it yet on our show. It was bitching, right? It was so cool just to hear that.
I remember a buddy of mine and we'd first put it on. We were driving, and I remember the street. I don't know the name, doesn't matter. And it was really ominous and foggy. And we put that on and blasted it, and we were driving through the fog, and it was almost eerie, like, wait, what's going on here?
Yeah,
It was almost creepy, but it was creepy in a really good sense. It was like the first time you saw um, Nightmare on Elm Street. You're like, whoa, what's going on? And then when it just kicks in, you're like, wow, it is for us 70s, 80s folks. We say bitchin'. The new kids probably don't know what that means.
yeah,
It was
no,
definitely bitchin'. It was a great freaking album.
yeah, absolutely. So we were inspired, right, Stephen, to do "Shout at the Devil." Definitely after doing "Too Fast for Love," and we put out the the video version, which you're watching now, and we put some shorts together. And we haven't had yet in a series of shorts, five little, vignettes, snippets on YouTube. Everyone did better than the last, and
Nice.
there were thousands of views on
I
each
love it.
one. And I'm like, whoa, okay, maybe we finally cracked the whole YouTube algorithm.
I'm telling you, it's the shorter's and for some.
Then we put
Short.
out the sixth video and it had 75 views. Okay, so and then we put out others and it popped up again. So there's something in there, right, that we're still trying to figure out. Yes, in this case, shorter is better. Shorter is better. You can attach to the short attention span theater, but
Yep.
it works. Anyway, we were pretty stoked with the content. It was fun to do. So here we are now, much of a lead in into this, Stephen. So Mötley Crüe, Shout the Devil. Uh, Mötley Crüe's second studio album, released on September 26, 1983. The record marked a darker, more aggressive turn from their debut, both musically and visually. It embraced heavy metal with a glam rock flair. It cemented their place, and this is for sure, as one of the key bands in the 80s metal scene. It had the controversial imagery,
Yeah, the pentagram.
catchy riff, and explosive energy. Again, the album caused a stir. Got to
Quite a
watch out for
bit.
the stir due to its pentagram image and flirtation with satanic themes, largely for shock value, which led to the controversy, especially among conservative groups. Despite, or perhaps because of this, it was a commercial success and became a defining album in 1980s metal, for sure.
And sold 200,000 copies in its first 2 weeks.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. It jumped out. And there was something cool. Let me pull this up, Stephen, if I may.
And
The
while you're looking that up, just and you might be looking up what I'm looking at too, is how Nicky got the pentagram was in the band that he was in with Blackie called Sister. And he had asked Blackie,
Yeah,
"Hey, can I borrow some of this stuff?" And Blackie's like, "Yeah, I don't care. I don't want
yeah,
to put myself into a corner."
no,
So when you look back at the history of these different things, it's like, oh, where did it come from? And you're like, oh, wait, Nicky played with Blackie. It's like, yeah, like a theatrical band before Mötley Crüe, which is
yeah.
it's kind of cool to see the back history of why and how it came about.
It is, yeah. And I remember that band. I never saw them.
I didn't
I
either.
was, I was too young, but I remember hearing about it. Um, but let's flash back really quick to 1981, Stephen, if we may.
Let's do
Um,
it.
from Classic Rock Magazine, this was Today in History. Today in History, 1981, Mötley Crüe played their first show at the Starwood in West Hollywood, opening for Y&T. That's pretty cool.
Wow,
Um,
that's
people were
weird.
yelling "F you" and flipping us the bird during the kickoff song "Take Me to the Top," as Vince Neil wrote and later in the band's biography, "The Dirt." Um, then, as he goes on to say, then one meathead in a black AC/DC shirt hooked glasses, hawked a loogie. Haven't used hawked on this yet. Hawked a
Up
loogie
to it.
that landed on their white leather pants. Without
Uh-oh.
even thinking, I leapt off the stage mid phrase and I put him in a headlock and started pummeling him. And that's where it all started. But on this day back in 1981, they played their first show. So here we are now coming full circle talking about their second album in 1983. Stephen, like you just said, it sold, 200,000 copies in its first 2 weeks. There was definitely a lot of buzz going on already, but that took it to the next level. The production was a step up for sure from the first record. First record still sounded great, but this one went even further. Top songs: Shout at the Devil, um, Anthem, Aggressive, title track, really becomes a fan favorite and was a live staple over the years. These next two songs are my two favorite all-time Mötley Crüe songs, just to put it out there, and I want to hear what you have to say, Stephen. Looks That Kill, the
Yep.
iconic riff in the music video. It helped bring metal to MTV for sure. Too Young to Fall in Love, just a good, really hard rock metal song with a really catchy hook. Those two, again, were my top two all-time Mötley Crüe songs. Helter Skelter, cool heavy cover of the Beatles track, and then Red Hot. It was Hot Paste, It was hot paced. It was fast paced, but it was hot paced too. Um, it was fast paced, almost thrash like track showing off Tommy Lee's drumming. How about for you, Stephen? What songs kind of
Well,
stood out?
those for sure. You know, the that whole album in and of itself created to me what was the sophomore album for Mötley Crüe, and it was a complete different a curve to them. I like all those songs. I don't know that I have an actual favorite because I really like that was my ultimate favorite Mötley Crüe album. I can't say the next ones we're going to talk about are not.
Yeah.
Shout at the Devil for sure. And I can't remember which video it was, but I think that I remember seeing the video of Mick Mars and looked like he had a little bit of blood coming out, and kind of was like, was that like a Gene Simmons ripoff or?
Yeah.
And speaking of Kiss, they had gone on tour with Kiss for Creatures of the Night and only lasted 5 concerts or 5 shows because they were so out of control. Gene said, "Bye, let's get rid of these guys." So
Yeah.
just to throw in a little bit of history of I'm sure the success and fame of these guys and the money and royalties and the I believe, and I don't remember what the US Festival date was in the early 80s, but that was about when that album came out, and they had played a few of those songs along with their first album, which was again an amazing hierarchy from Too Fast for Love. I just the whole album was dynamite.
No, for sure. And it seems like, here's somewhat of a trend, right? Wasn't Kiss just a little irked with Van Halen as well? And again, was that something that they wanted to be, did they want to get shown up on? Probably not. But, as cool as Kiss was from the theatrics and the show they could put on, again, I'm not a huge Kiss fan at all, but these young upstarts definitely, probably ran circles around
And
them.
that was
So
when Kiss had taken the makeup off too, so it was a whole new kind of unleash of Kiss. We're not going to talk about that album, but I thought it was a great album. A lot of people shit on it, but that'll be another show. But Motley Crue, and again, I mentioned the last show that I saw them when their first album came out at Santa Monica Civic, and I was just shattered by like this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And like that was really my first heavy metal show. In your face, loud, small venue, just killer. And to this day, when I look back at all the shows that you and I've been to a lot of concerts, and to this day, that will be my first number one ever show that I've ever saw that just shreds over everything else.
oh yeah, for sure.
Not
And
going
and
backwards.
no, no, no. But I remember you brought it up before, your experience, and it's worth noting because it's such a great story. Going to Santa Monica Civic, um, and then what the buses weren't running after the show because it was later. So the only option you had was to and I'm doing this because you had to dial the phone. There wasn't any of this, and
It was a
there wasn't
payphone at
yeah, there
that too.
wasn't pulling up an Uber. It was this nasty payphone that you probably held like a foot from your mouth. That's what she said. So that way that you wouldn't get anything.
Yeah.
Santa Monica, right? There's some nice parts and there's also some not so nice parts. But yeah, seeing shows back then, it's just such a different, you know, experience
A
and
cool.
opportunity.
It was, and we mentioned, like I mentioned on the last show about being on Sunset Strip on the weekends, and it was that whole vibe that really created this whole heavy metal scene of bands that wanted to make it, bands that played, bands that knew one another. Everybody wanted to be, and I honestly, truly believe that Motley Crue was the start of all that.
Yeah, you've said it before. And after that, after you mentioned it, I was kind of going back and thinking, all right, who else in that time frame stood out as like true metal, really, really kind of shook everything to the core. Guys, you're listening. comment for sure. You may have a different experience. You may say band such and such, but I can't. I got to agree with you. And I just want to introduce you as Rock Hardaway because Rock Hardaway's back for another show. Um, yeah, they're definitely were the top of the game. You talked about tours. So in 83, 84, again, the Shout at the Devil tour, major step up in production, more pyrotechnic. Wow.
That too.
And this, yeah, this is just a regular drink,
You
right?
could just say pyros.
Pyro. Yeah, I'm trying to be fancy here. Pyro, fog, wild state antics. Again, they were doing that when they played the Whiskey in Starwood, but
Yeah, in
they had
small
budget,
clubs.
right? They had budget, so they were able to do that. Um, we've talked before about how much of an impact Ozzy has had on helping new
Yeah,
bands.
for
Motley
sure.
Crüe opened for Ozzy on the Bark of the Moon tour,
Yep.
so that gave him massive exposure for sure. That further just developed their bad boy image. There's stories of hotel destruction, substance abuse. It's rock and roll, right? Sex, drugs, rock and roll, outrageous behavior. All that became Crüe legend for sure.
Yeah, when you look at the story of all the different tours they did, it's all just about debauchery and mayhem and being out of control. I mean, you've seen videos where, it's kind of like the Van Halen thing where you see Dave, down in a bottle of Jack. The Motley Crue guys were doing the same thing. They were taking pills and doing whatever. There was car crashes. Nikki Sixx got into a car crash. I think he was dating Demi Moore at the time, and she's like, "You need Alcoholics Anonymous." And then Vince Neil was an infamous crash, which was Razzle
Mhm.
from Hanoi Rocks down in or Redondo Beach, and Vince lived down there at the time, was racing around, and I don't know what kind of car it was, crashed and killed him. So this band has been plagued with a lot of destruction and sadness, and when you will obviously get to some above points of where the band is now. I know Nikki just came out with a biography, but this band, they got famous fast, they got money fast, they got, it's you think back to watching that movie about Johnny Cash and Elvis and all that, and they were like, "Hey, I'm tired." He goes, "Oh, here, you want to try some of this?" And it just one thing leads to another, which is
Yeah,
unfortunate. And these guys got into a lot of trouble, in which it eventually leaded. Wow, started getting some of that in
yeah.
you. Led to Nikki getting involved with heroin, and we'll talk about that on another album with a song that coins that incident. But you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Scott and I have been in bands and have been in metal and for many years. I never got involved in any of that stuff. I can't say that I didn't do my fair share of partying, but I didn't get to the extreme of, I think I got it out of my system before I was even 21.
Yeah,
Uh, and because to me, music was more important than that kind of crap. And it's easy for people when all of a sudden somebody drops a bunch of money in your lap. You don't have to work anymore. You can buy whatever house, whatever cars. People are giving you dope. People are, this and that. I get it. If you have an addictive personality, this is what these guys did.
yeah,
Tommy, I don't know that Mick was so much involved in that. There's not much on him. Tommy doesn't have much, but Vince and Nikki for sure got into some serious trouble. However, that doesn't take away from the music that they wrote and the killer heavy metal that they put out because I loved it.
for sure. And I think in all this, it's an art form, it's expression. It
Yes.
wouldn't have it wouldn't have ended up the same way without all of those
No,
ingredients, right?
no,
That
for
that
sure.
was just what it was about. And sure,
Yeah.
there's plenty of stories, um, and very well documented for Motley Crue as well as other bands. And if you guys are even casual listeners, but big time listeners of metal and rock and roll, you could talk for hours and hours and hours about everything that's been impacted. But I think when you boil it down, it was just, again, part of the ingredients. It was part of what went into this music stew. How's that? Music stew, rock stew, went into the rock stew. Uh, a couple, notable facts, and know you hit on sales a little bit from the first 2 weeks. Overall, it was certified 4 times platinum. That's over 4 million copies sold in the U.S. International sales, it added a few hundred thousand, or several hundred thousand more. So right around in the 5 million, 5.5 million, probably as a total. Um, Notable facts. So we talked about the album cover. Again, it featured the pentagram. Cool
Yeah.
image, though. Really, just, I wasn't, when I was 13, you weren't into and even recognizing what was the whole, like,
I had no clue.
reason behind it. It was just like, whoa. If you were into ghost stories or horror films or any of that, that piqued your interest as far as, oh, look at these guys. They have this look, they have this sound. It was all just part of the mystery of when you're really young, of trying to, discover and find out what music was about. That's what made it so cool. So, of
And we
course,
didn't have the internet back then. So
no.
what we would hear, excuse me, what we'd hear about this pentagram was that supposedly was the goat head for the devil and blah blah blah, which created the Christian coalition that got really uppity. And I'm sure you remember. I've been to many metal concerts back in the '80s, and there were a lot of people out there
Yep.
with
Holding up the
the
signs. Yeah.
crosses and the signs and repent and people
Yeah.
in my face. And I'm like, I don't care about any of that. I don't.
No.
When you even watch Iron Maiden in Long Beach, and Bruce talks about, he goes, people are like, we're into devil worship, and he's like, you're so full of shit. That's nothing to do with that.
No.
They blamed it on Ozzy. They said Kiss was like knights in Satan's service, the backward masking. Rob Halford had to go to court because some guy. Anyhow,
Yeah.
I don't go. I'm digressing, but those kind of things when we were younger, when we saw that, didn't make us go, "Oh my God, I'm gonna mash with the devil." It's like we were just looking at it, going, "That's pretty cool."
Yeah, totally.
We
And
didn't
and
know
that's
what it
exactly
was.
what it's about.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
cool. It was totally cool.
Yeah.
Or as we said earlier, that was bitching.
It was bitching. It really was. And
Excuse me. But this album again, and when we move on, because I have a feeling that we're gonna do a series on Mötley Crüe when we go to the next album, where you go, it just changes again. But this album to me molded again a new found love for this band. The first one was like, that was my introduction to first heavy metal.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd heard of other bands, but that was like that was my first heavy metal show I saw. And when I was how old was I? I wasn't even in high school yet, I don't think. And I'm just like blown away, going, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
So cool.
It was, yeah. And definitely, if you're new to our show, again, thank you for tuning in. We're at
Thank you.
episode 50. You can listen to us, and I guess if you jump in 20 minutes into this, you can listen to us anywhere you stream. Kind of throw that stuff out on YouTube. But yes, Stephen, to your point, we did Too Fast for Love. We're doing Shout the Devil. We're going to do Theater of Pain. We're going to do a couple more after that. So we'll kind of put all these together. We'll string all these episodes together. I think it's something fun. I think when you really break it down, Mötley Crüe is has been, is no longer, but has been one of the biggest metal bands of all time. Um, this
I
record,
agree.
Shout at the Devil, produced by Tom Warman. He helped refine their sound into a more commercial metal style. Again, I think like most bands, you have the lifetime to write your first record, and then you have 2 months while you're on the road to write your second, third, fourth, fifth. So everything gets compressed. Um, Hopefully, just being around, you further develop your skill and how
Sure.
you kind of relate to everybody. But yeah, it definitely was a great sounding record with great songs. It was pivotal, really, in making Mötley Crüe. I think at this point, by the time they got through the Aussie tour, and then to other other avenues. A household name. MTV was massive during this time.
Huge.
Friday night videos on NBC. I remember that. There was another
Yep.
show on ABC.
And Ricky
Um,
Rocket show.
yeah, all that. Ricky Rocket
I
or
just
Rocket?
wanted to
Yeah,
to just go back to Too Young to Fall in Love. To me, was the beginning of bands making ballads. It was to me the beginning of going, oh, that's kind of cool. It's a little bit more of it's slower rock tune. And to me, that was like, again, Mötley Crüe was the first for a lot of different things. Everybody all of a sudden started doing ballads. I don't know if it was Mötley Crüe that started it, but to me, Too Young to Fall in Love was the beginning of let's start making ballad songs because it kind of was ballady in a sense. It was still heavy, but it was like, oh, it's kind of slower and like, oh shit, yeah, but yeah, Too
I
Young to
think it had a
Fall in
good
Love.
catchy hook. Yeah,
I
it's
think
definitely.
I do too.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
it's
my
definitely
voice cracked.
once they get into the next record, which we'll talk about when you hit on Home Sweet Home. That kind of what
Yeah,
was the epitome of a rock metal ballad. But yeah, there was melody in that. It was structured well, had a great
absolutely.
hook. It was catchy. So again, I think it just made this type of music way more accessible to the masses.
Yeah. I was doing 2 minutes left.
Yeah,
But and when you look at all the credits on who writes these songs, which is interesting, is Nikki wrote most of these songs, and all the drama today. And I don't want to bring it up now, but everybody's saying that oh he's not playing live and he's doing this and doing that. It's like I think people have way too much time on their hands. It's like just go to a show and enjoy
yeah,
it. Yeah, Vince can't sing his way out of a paper bag anymore. It's okay. I don't
yeah,
care. But if you want to go see Mötley Crüe before you kick the bucket, and that's a bucket list thing, go see them play because they put on a heck of a show.
yeah.
And whether it's live or not, I mean, John Five, that's kind of an interesting thing, but whatever. I wish Mick was still there, but it is what it is. But this album by far was one of the better sophomore albums of a lot of bands that I've heard.
I think so.
Truthfully, truthfully.
Again, we've been talking about Mötley Crüe, Shout at the Devil. Again, their second studio release came out September 23, September 26th, 1983. I wanted to put
Yeah,
the
okay.
month and the year all together. So 83.
That's a
Um,
mashup.
it is. Again, it's a darker record. It's an aggressive turn from their debut. It has great songs that we highlighted. I have two of my favorite all time from this. Steven is fair. You go. I couldn't just pick one. I like the whole record.
I do like the whole
That's a
album.
great answer. That's a great answer. So with this, guys, as always, we appreciate you taking the time. We will be back. We'll be back next week with 51. And until then, as always, check us out anywhere you stream on YouTube,
Thank you, everybody.
Wheelie Q Barbecue. Go check out the site.
Absolutely.